when I came back from Mexico, where I had gone, and that's when I understood there was a women's movement. Otherwise, I was a pure academic with Amartya Sen, Sukhmoy Chakravarti, Jagdish Bhagwati. We were all in the Delhi school. And I was what you call a queen bee, I had no concern for the female of the species. I was just an academic. Then by chance, because I had written this book, I was invited to go to Mexico, and I found this huge group of 10,000 women in a hall who didn't know each other, but all acted as if they were one big party, political party. And it was like going to a Congress party meeting, you just can't get converted. So I got converted, and Esther Boserup was there. I don't know how many of you have read Esther Boserup's book. I was amazed with Esther Boserup's work. So when I came back, I went to ICSSR, and though I was still teaching at Miranda House, I said, why don't you give me some money? I'm shocked at the Indian official national sample survey figure on labor force participation. At 1970s, it was 64 for men and 32 for women. But your eyes could see that women were on the streets, women were in the farms, women everywhere, sometimes working in the night in the rural areas. So I said there must be some mistake in this. So I took up what is considered a pioneering first time study of time use, where 4 of us went and lived in 3 villages in Rajasthan and 3 in West Bengal to show agroclimatic regions. And we did what is called activity recording, observation part thing. So we did activity record, but the thing we did, which all of you should do, if I may be like say should and all that, is I divided my sample across class. Normally samples are, so for landlessness, there was a brilliant economist who is no more called Ashok Rudra. He told me, Devaki, the only proxy you can have is land at the moment, not cow. So I divided my population across class. And then with the collaboration of NSSO, so that nobody will say this mad woman came and did some study, the official system, we chose sample of households where I could do estimational derivatives, otherwise the sample cannot be used for estimate. And it was amazing, we found that amongst the landless households, the female labor force participation of the woman's labor force was greater than the man of that household. So if it was 72 for the woman, it was 62 for the man. Now that gave me a handle to go back to NSSO and one could do that in those days. One could go to an NSO meeting and they would ask us, what do you think? And say, look, you always call women supplementary breadwinners. We are called supplementary breadwinners. But actually she is the breadwinner for the family. She works like hell and supports the entire family. So you must call her the primary breadwinner. That sort of began to turn the image or the perception that women were always the hangers-on. So that's one study which rocked, and to some extent I can't say they began to do landlessness, but they began to explore women's work within the household in less rigid ways than the 91 codes. The 91 codes, with the last one says, what is your activity? You say, I am a domestic active. Instead of that, they asked more questions, like what did you do for 3 hours last week? I cut grass. What did you do? I milked a cow. So you bundle them into the gainful activity. The second was that in the household survey, I don't know if you've seen UN's household surveys, the last section is of social services. And in those days, in the 1980s, 90s, when I used to go to Bangkok for the UN household survey expert group, they had put destitutes, handicapped. In those days they were not called, they were called handicapped, they were not called physically challenged and all that, and women and widows in that last section, that is the useless section. So you bundle destitutes, widows, women and physically disadvantaged. So I was up and I roared, I screamed, I said, how could you do that? They said, don't worry, that's the UN classification. But anyway, now that has stopped. Now you have women according to their occupation across the street. So these are, so what one is arguing is that you value this last woman, this landless woman as a dependent, number one. You don't have any perception really of how much value she is adding to your economy. She may not have a wage work, but she may be actually harvesting grass, she may be, in fact she maybe even creating manure for her garden, whatever it is. So some way we have to pretend or measure that she actually adds value to the economy. Now suppose you argue like that, then the theory that I am putting forward, which I call the bubbling up theory of growth, which is nothing more than a reinterpretation of Gandhi, that if you start with understanding her life, her work, her needs, for example, she definitely needs a good wage, in which case she will not sell her daughter, but she will send her to school. She definitely needs support services like access to water, fuel, ground atta and all that. So you start supporting her to add value to the economy, rather than seeing her as this last poor woman to whom you give some pension or you just treat her as somebody who needs welfare. Then the economy can grow from her thing. And I make a joke and say that if you do that, then you won't have to talk of inclusive growth, you won't have to fight against inequality, you don't have to worry about conservation because she is very resourceful. And so you really rebuild the economy and take away all the warts that are right now on our economy. Now that's like a vision or an ideal thing. By appealing to a lot of communities across the country, including all of you, you can build up, I would say you can build up data to show that this woman is not a valueless dependent on all of you. You can actually show her value added, and some people are doing that. That would be, so that was the third section, and the middle one is where I think you might have, you might learn something in that, and that is quotations from Adam Smith, from Joan Robinson, from Stiglitz, from Amartya Sen, and from dear Governor of Reserve Bank, that in fact GDP is a stupid figure to build your economic knowledge about what is happening to the economy, that it does not reflect what is really happening, and it misleads you. My whole point is your data collection is misleading you. It's not that I intentionally treat the poor woman badly, but if I always see her as a valueless dependent, then I will not know. But if I can show that she is a valuable nugget in the economic pyramid, then you will treat her that way. So there is need for improvement in data. And as I said, all these economists are arguing that GDP must not be seen as the be all and the end all. And as you know, Sarkozy has set up a commission, and the commission is to look at data, and the Sarkozy commission is arguing keep GDP but 5 or 10 other indicators. Beena Agarwal is on that commission. The report is out, you can see that. I have a paper I have written of shifts in GDP over the last 10 years according from the sector of origin. So 15 years ago, before the reform period, Professor Ramurthy, it was agriculture, then industry, then services. Today it is services, industry and agriculture. Obvious reason why we have food problems. So we got overwhelmed by the fact that we were doing so well with IT. The second aspect about IT, it is very capital driven. It is, the labor capital ratio is very high. So we lost out both counts, providing employment to the masses in India and providing food to the masses in India. So by looking at the ultimate figure of GDP, you're concealing a lot of wickedness that is happening inside. So that's why the GDP, and looking at it carefully and speaking about it and where it comes from, and how many decades Dr. Swaminathan been saying jobless growth is wrong, jobless growth is wrong, but we are having jobless growth. And the prediction now is that since China is going into more capital intensive products for competitive reasons, India will also go into capital intensive production. That is, her garment factories will shift from home based work into factory mode, which will mean more unemployment for more poor people. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting for me, and hopefully you will do that too, to look at the value that poor are providing to India. You know, instead of looking at poor as a nuisance, look at value of the poor. And as a feminist, I start with the woman.